This video is sponsored by Dubby Jitterless Energy Blend. Click on the link in the description and use the code PackerMan to save 10% on any order. April the 3rd, 1974. And if you're someone who follows tornado history, you know that date very, very well. It is the day of one of the most infamous tornado outbreaks in all of history. The 1974 Super Outbreak. And this is going to be one of many episodes that will be talking about tornadoes from this particular outbreak. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about not one, but two F5s that struck several communities in the state of Alabama literally minutes apart. Today we're going to be talking about the twin F5s that struck Tanner in 1974. This is Tornado Tales.
Oh, that is scary. The truck is, oh my gosh. Holy smokes.
What's happening, ladies and germs? This is the PackerMan, and welcome to this edition of Tornado Tales. It's been a minute, and I apologize for that. I've just been really busy the last month or two. Work has been crazy, to say the least, which is why the number of live streams and videos have kind of tapered off a little bit in recent weeks. But here this weekend, on Memorial Day weekend that I'm recording this, finally able to get some videos done. So, doing an episode of Tornado Tales today, and on today's episode, we're going to be taking a look back at our first deep dive into one of the most infamous outbreaks in U.S. history and in all of world history. I, of course, am talking about the 1974 Super Outbreak. For the longest time, it was the largest tornado outbreak on record for a single 24-hour period. That is until its much more powerful cousin, the 2011 Super Outbreak, happened. But still, the 74 Super Outbreak is still infamous for a lot of different reasons. Because let's get one thing completely clear here. This is 1974 we're talking about. This is before the implementation of highly advanced radar systems, and of course the next rad radar, which would be developed in the 90s. So, being able to predict and warn people about the tornadoes in this particular outbreak had to be stressful as all hell for all the meteorologists involved in this. This outbreak in particular struck 13 states and the Canadian province of Ontario. 148 twisters from this particular outbreak, including the most violent tornadoes ever recorded in a single outbreak. How many violent tornadoes were there? Well, there were 23 confirmed F4 tornadoes. And remember, a violent tornado is considered a tornado that has F4 strength or higher. 23 F4 tornadoes were recorded in this tornado outbreak. You want to know how many F5s were recorded from this outbreak? And bear in mind, the total number of tornadoes recorded that were F5 or EF5 level strength accounts for, it's basically less than 0.1% of all tornadoes recorded. There have been a grand total of 62 official tornadoes rated at a force 5 or above. Or a force 5, I should say. 62 tornadoes total since 1950, officially rated in F5 or an EF5. That's basically less than one per year. And we have not had a force 5 rated tornado in 10 years. The last one was all the way back in 2013, the one that struck Moore, Oklahoma, which I covered on this show during its second episode, and is still the most watched episode and also the most watched video on my channel so far. So go back and look at that one. And I go into depth on that tornado. That is the last Force 5 rated tornado that has struck the United States. So it's been over a decade since the last Force 5 rated tornado. The 1974 Super Outbreak had 7. Yeah, not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6. 7. 7 F5 tornadoes in a 24-hour period. Yeah. That is frightening, to say the least. This outbreak caused about $843 million in damage, and that's in 1974 dollars. The 2019 equivalent would be $4.5 billion. Yeah. In fact, this outbreak was so incredibly crazy that at one point, the entire state of Indiana was put under a blanket tornado warning. The only time in history that has ever happened. That's how crazy this was. On this particular episode, we're going to be talking about 2 of the 7 F5s that happened on this particular day, April 3rd, 1974. And those were the 2 tornadoes, the 2 F5 tornadoes that struck the unfortunately placed town of Tanner, Alabama. Now, Alabama is no stranger to violent tornadoes. In fact, since 1950, it has one of the highest death rates. In fact, I think it has the highest death rate of any state in the United States as far as tornadoes are concerned. They see a lot of violent tornadoes, and in this particular case, they saw several violent tornadoes, including 3 F5s. Because in addition to the 2 F5 tornadoes that struck Tanner, there was also the one that struck the town of Ewan, and is considered one of the most powerful tornadoes ever recorded. That's a tornado that we will be covering in the future, for sure. But as far as the Tanner, Alabama tornado is concerned, this tornado, in particular, was formed from strong storms that developed just east of the Mississippi River into the Tennessee Valley and Mississippi. It produced the first deadly tornadoes in Alabama during the early evening hours, right around 6 p.m., and most of the small town of Tanner, as well as the towns of Capshaw and Harvest, were completely destroyed by these 2 F5 tornadoes. And coincidentally, they'd be struck by another EF5 rated tornado during the 2011 Super Outbreak, the one that basically blotted out Hackleburg and Phil Campbell. And that'll be another one we'll cover on this show probably in the future. But Tanner was basically destroyed when 2 F5 tornadoes struck the town 30 minutes apart. Yeah. And their paths basically paralleled each other. In fact, the paths of both of these tornadoes were less than a mile apart. Buildings that were spared in the first tornado were destroyed in the second one. The first tornado formed at 6:30 p.m. Central Time in Lawrence County, Alabama, and ended just over 90 minutes later in Madison County, Alabama. Both of these tornadoes were long track tornadoes. The first tornado, 90 minutes it stayed on the ground. It first touched down near the small community of Mount Hope and then tracked it to Mount Moriah, where the tornado rapidly intensified and swept away homes and hurled fleeing vehicles, which is also where a family of 6 were tragically killed. Many homes were swept away near the town of Moulton, and a water pump was completely lifted out of a well house along SR 157. In one case, the destruction was so complete that a witness reported that the largest recognizable objects among scattered debris from an obliterated house were some bed springs. This is the scary thing about this particular outbreak, is the fact that these tornadoes were just so incredibly powerful and so violent. It was just the perfect combination, just the perfect hotbed for all of these tornadoes. Because when you have a strong upper level jet stream and a moist low level jet stream coming up from the Gulf of Mexico, and these two collide, that's just a fertile ground for isolated supercells that are not competing with each other for energy. And when you have a situation like that, we have these isolated supercells, it can make for extremely violent long track tornadoes, and that's exactly what happened on this particular day. 148 total tornadoes, 30 of them being violent. It's insanity. But anyways, getting back to the first Tanner tornado, the twister crossed into Morgan County, causing additional destruction in rural areas near Hillsborough and Trinity. And then it crosses the Tennessee River. So the brief period of time that a tornado crosses over a river, it becomes a water spout. And the tornado flattened a 3/4 mile wide swath of trees on the opposite bank. And there was ground scouring occurring in this area. And if you don't know what that is, ground scouring is basically where a tornado basically sucks up the dirt, the topsoil on the ground, and basically leaves these giant trenches. In some particular cases, like the Philadelphia, Mississippi tornado from the 2011 outbreak, some of these ground scouring trenches were up to 2 feet deep. So, when intense ground scouring occurs, that's an extremely powerful tornado, and I believe I've said this in the past. Reddish soil was dug up and plastered against trees, and then, at peak strength, the storm slammed into Tanner, where many homes were swept away, vehicles were tossed, shrubbery was debarked, and the Lawson's trailer park was basically completely destroyed. The tornado then continued into Madison County and struck the Capshaw and Harvest areas. Numerous homes in Harvest and surrounding rural areas of the county were swept away completely, and extensive windrowing of debris was noted. In fact, in another instance of this tornado's power, and you see this in the thumbnail, and it's a pretty infamous picture, there was a picture of a bathtub from one residence that was found deeply embedded in the ground. It was still pretty much whole, and it was embedded into the ground like a spear. And then, past Harvest, the tornado abruptly dissipated northeast of the town, having a peak width of 500 yards, so just short of half a mile. And in this tornado's wake, there were 28 total fatalities, with 267 people injured. And then, roughly half an hour after that tornado, rescue efforts were underway to look for people under the destroyed structures in Tanner, Capshaw, and Harvest. And then another violent tornado would strike the area. This tornado formed at 7:35 p.m. and this tornado had a length of 83 miles. So this was yet another long track tornado. Also had a peak width of 500 yards. And formed along the North Bank Tennessee River less than a mile from the path of the earlier tornado, with much of its path very closely paralleling its predecessor, as it tore through Limestone and Madison counties. Tanner was the first community to be hit by this second tornado, and many structures that were left standing after the first tornado were destroyed in the second one. And you want to talk about a case of wrong place, wrong time, and having the worst luck possible. There was a man who was injured in the first F5 at the Lawson's trailer park. He was rescued and was taken to a church in the area, which was, I would say, was going to be converted into like a shelter for the injured. And then that building was destroyed in the second F5, and he ended up dying in the collapse. So, after devastating what was left of Tanner, the tornado continued across rural Limestone County and into Madison County, where the communities of Capshaw and Harvest were once again devastated. Numerous homes throughout Madison County were swept completely away, with extensive windrowing of debris noted once again. Past Harvest, the tornado swept away multiple additional homes in the Hazel Green area, and then it continued northeastward through rural portions of Madison County before crossing over into Tennessee, where major damage and 6 fatalities occurred in Franklin and Lincoln counties before the tornado finally dissipated in Coffee County. 2 of those fatalities in Tennessee occurred when a church was destroyed during service. 16 people were killed in this second tornado, with 190 being injured. 44 people were killed in both of these F5 tornadoes, with 457 total injuries, and over 1,200 buildings were completely destroyed. The most interesting thing about the second F5 tornado was the fact that its rating is disputed by some scientists, which some people say that it only estimates EF3 to F, or in this case F3 to F4 damage completely along the entirety of the second storm's path. However, official records still rate this tornado as an F5, which means that this is one of the only occasions where a community or a series of communities were struck by not one, but 2 F5s within the same day. Talk about being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And thus ends the story of the twin F5 tornadoes that struck the town of Tanner, Alabama, and the surrounding areas. I hope you enjoyed this episode. There's going to be more to come. Hopefully I'll be able to get back on track and recording these in rapid fire succession, because obviously this has probably been the most successful series that I've done on my channel. The response has been pretty incredible, to say the least. So I do want to get some more episodes done here in the near future. So the next episode of Tornado Tales, we're going to be talking about another particularly infamous F5 tornado. You know it as the Dead Man Walking. Now, of course, I'm talking about the 1997 Gerald, Texas F5 tornado. Whoo, boy, the story's coming out of that one. Whoo, buddy. All I can say is I hope you don't have a weak stomach, because some of the stories I've heard about that tornado, enough to make your skin crawl. But that'll be in the next episode. So, thank you very much for watching this edition of Tornado Tales, and until next time, this is the PackerMan signing out. See you later. What's happening, ladies and germs? Thank you for watching tonight's video. If you're interested in sponsoring the channel, there is a link to my Patreon down in the description box below. Otherwise, hit like and subscribe if you want to continue watching great content like you saw today. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, this is the PackerMan signing out.